So number 23 is talking about logarithmic equations. And logarithmic equations are pretty much the same thing as logarithms. Okay, so we have our base of 2, our exponent of 5, and then it equals 3x minus 1. So then we just have to figure out what 2 to the 5th power is, which is 32. 3x minus 1. And then we just have to solve. So we'd add 1, which would be 33. Divide by 3. And 33 divided by 3 is 11. So x would equal 11. Alright, 24 wants to know, or it says 3 high school students are trying to determine what proportion of households in their community recycle. Student A surveyed 25 of his family members and closest friends. So we're going to underline that. Family members and closest friends. Student B divided the community into 5 equivalent sections and randomly surveyed 5 households from each section. And student C surveyed the first 25 people who walked into the local mall. And it says which data set is the most reliable and why. So I'm going to go with student B, because student A just did family members and closest friends. So that's not a true member of a true proportion of the community. It's just his family members. And student C is just doing local mall. So who knows if those are true community members? That could be somebody from outside of the community. Okay, so student B best does the community because he divided up his entire community and divided it into 5 sections and randomly surveyed 5 households. Okay, and he collected data from, and I just said it, a random sample. And so that kind of determines what proportion recycles. And guys, I will tell you, most of these are going to be random. Carefully selected sample isn't even really a thing. Whenever you see these sample questions, it's either going to be random or normal, and most of the time it's going to be a random sample. Alright, 25 wants to know a solution. So whenever we have 2 fractions that are equal to each other, we have to cross multiply. So we've got 2 times x minus 1 equals 1 times x squared minus x. So that would be 2x minus 2 equals x squared minus x. So since I have an x squared, that means that this is going to be a quadratic. So since it's a quadratic, you have to get everything on one side. So it's going to be x squared, because I only have one x squared. Then I have this 2x. So I'm going to subtract it to the other side. So negative 1 minus 2x is going to be negative 3x. And then I just have this minus 2. I'm going to move it to the other side, which would be a plus 2. So now since everything is equal to 0, this looks factorable, right? So since a is 1, I can draw an x. So it's going to multiply to 2 and add to negative 3. That would be negative 2 and negative 1. So I'd have x minus 2 and x minus 1. Okay, it wants to know what x equals, so that means I'm going to have to set both of these equal to 0. So x would equal 2 and x would equal 1. Now, it says what is the solution, not what are these solutions. So that means I should only have one answer, right? Now, we've talked about this before. I can't have the denominator be 0. So if I plug in 1, 1 minus 1 is 0. So that's a problem. So 1 doesn't work. So my answer would be 2 in this case. Right, number 26 wants to know what f of g of x is. So basically what that means is I'm going to start with f of x, and anytime I see an x, I'm going to plug in whatever g of x is. So I have x squared, so instead of x, I'm going to plug in 4x minus 10 squared back to this, plus 8. I see another x, so instead of x, I'm going to plug in 4x minus 10, back to up here, minus 20. So another way to think of this is, instead of x's, I'm going to put blanks. So x squared plus 8x minus 20. And in those blanks, I put whatever g of x is, which is 4x minus 10. So that's basically what I did there. Okay, so then I see something squared, so I'm going to write it twice. Whoa. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and multiply that. 4x times 4x is 16x squared. Got 4x times negative 10, so that's going to be negative 40x. I've got negative 10 times 4x, so that's going to be another negative 40x. Then I've got negative 10 times negative 10, so plus 100. Then I'm going back to up here. I've got 8 times 4x, so that's plus 32x. I've got 8 times negative 10, so that's negative 80. Okay, and then I still got that minus 20 at the end. So now I just have to combine my terms. So I don't have anything else squared, so I've got 16x squared. I've got minus 40x plus 32. So minus 40 is negative 80, and negative 80 plus 32 is negative 48. Okay, then I've got 100 minus 80 minus 20. So that would all cancel out. So my answer would be 16x squared minus 48x, which is answer choice B. Alright, 27 basically says in order to pass something, they need over 50% of the votes, and a random poll of 600 voters and 52% of the voters supported. And then a margin of error in the poll is plus or minus 4%, should they believe that it will be approved. Okay? And since some of the values, since it's plus or minus 4%, so since it's 52, if it goes down 4%, that would be 48%. If it goes up 4%, that would be 56%. Okay, so it has to be over 50% of the votes in order to pass, right? Since there's a chance that it won't be over 50%, then we have to believe that it might not happen. Okay, so answer is going to be answer choice A, because it includes values that are less than 50%. Okay. All right, number 28 is about the logarithmic properties again. So since I'm adding here, that means the 2 and the x plus 3, then I'm going to multiply those. Since they have the same base, then you're multiplying. So I'm going to say 2 times x minus 3, and then equals, since this 2 is out in front, again, that means that it's going to be raised to the power. So 4 squared. Again, since they all have the same base, then those bases just get dropped. Remember the drop the base thing? That again applies here. So now we just have to simplify. So I'm going to distribute that 2. So 2x minus 6, and then 4 squared is 16. I would add 6, so 16 plus 6 is 22. And then I'm left with 2x divided by 2, and 22 divided by 2 is 11. So x would equal 11. All right, on 29, we're going to have to FOIL this out. So I've got square root of 3 times square root of 2. And 3 times 2 is 6. Got square root of 3 times square root of 6. 3 times 6 is 18. I've got 5 times square root of 2. Now, since this 5 is not under the radical, remember, I can't mix and match them. The 5 has to stay on the outside, and the 2 has to stay on the inside. And then the same thing here. Since the 5 is on the outside, it has to stay on the outside, and the 6 has to stay on the inside. I'm sorry, on the outside. Okay? Now, what I can do here is I have the square root of 18. Now, 18, does 18 have any perfect squares in it? Yes, it does. 1 and 18, 2 and 9. 9 is a perfect square. So, the square root of 9 is 3. So, 3 is that magic number that's going to go on the outside. And 2 is the leftover number that's going to stay on the inside. So then, none of my other 6 doesn't have any perfect squares that go in it. So it stays. 2 doesn't have any perfect squares in it, so it stays. And again, 6 doesn't have any, so it stays. And remember to add and subtract, which in this case we're all adding. They have to have the same number underneath. So here we have a 6, and here we have a 6. So this is understood to be a 1, so I have 1 plus 5, which is 6. And then I have 3 plus 5, which is 8. And the number underneath the radical stays the same. So that is answer choice D. All right. Number 30 wants to know the least common multiple for the polynomials. And then it wants to know, it's just basically all it's asking is what are the factors of all of them, okay? So first we have x squared plus 7x plus 6. So the way that we can factor this, since a is 1, is that we just draw our x. So what's going to multiply to 6 and add to 7? 6 and 1. So x plus 6 and x plus 1 is how we would factor that first one. Okay, our second one is x squared minus 1. Since this only has 2 terms, it's a binomial. It's a difference because there's a minus sign in between. And 1 is also a perfect square. So this is going to be a difference of squares. So we can split it up as to x plus 1 and x minus 1. So then that's how we would factor that second one. And last but not least, we have 2x squared plus 9x minus 18. The first thing we should do is look for a greatest common factor. In this one, we don't have a greatest common factor. So then, in this one, since a, which in this case is 2, is not 1, we have to slide and divide. So we take 2 and multiply it times negative 18. So 2 times 18 is 36. So now we draw our x. We think of a number that multiplies to negative 36 and adds to 9. And that is 12 and negative 3. So then we're going to say x plus 12 and x minus 3. Now, since I multiplied by this 2 in the beginning, I now have to divide by that 2. If it ends up perfect, like 12 divided by 2, we just simply divide. So that would be 6. If it doesn't end up perfect, like 3 divided by 2, we take that 2 and bring it in front of the x. So 2x minus 3. So now we have all of our factors. Everything is factored. And we have some of them that are similar. So here we have an x plus 6, and here we have an x plus 6. So C has x plus 6. We have an x plus 1 here, and an x plus 1 here. So A is x plus 1. We have an x minus 1. D is x minus 1. And last but not least, we